Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started for the people who are already here. My name is Joni Parsons, co-creator of Revel 11. We started Revel 11 about 4 years ago for men and women around the globe to join us. We pivoted online in March of last year, and it's just been an incredible journey to open it up to a global community. So thank you all for joining us. As I mentioned, I'm here in Seattle along with Stephanie and many who are joining us as well. So here we are. We're here to talk about the all-important conversation around money. Why do we put so much emphasis on money, spending it and making it, giving it away and putting it in the bank? And we work so hard every day to make the money, and you can really look at our priorities square in the eye when you look at your bank statement or your credit card bill to see how you're spending money. I took a look after I was putting this together. I'm like, now I know where my priorities are, and then I'm going to switch them around a little bit, or a lot, as the case may be. But in order to see how we handle money, you really have to look back. So when I was a little girl growing up in my household, there was an emphasis on money, and the story that went behind it was this: rob Peter to pay Paul. So as a little girl and growing up, what do you do with that conversation that rob Peter to pay Paul is how you deal with money? Well, you learn pretty quickly that it's not a very sustainable model. So it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. So I'm thrilled to introduce Stephanie Ellis-Smith, a very good friend and a very knowledgeable person around money, to talk to us tonight about how we handle our money, our stories around money, and our incredible opportunity to make a difference by giving money away. So with that, welcome, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited about our conversation, and I know everyone else is too. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being brave enough to bring up the topic, Joni.
Well, that leads very nicely into my couple of first questions. But before that, Stephanie, I'd love to know how you got interested in the topic of money and decided to open your company several years ago. Can you tell us that before we talk a little bit more detail about the moolah?
Sure. So as all of our stories are, it's complicated, particularly when you are talking about things like money and what to do with it. I've been in the nonprofit sector, basically holding every seat at the table for the past, dare I say, almost 25 years now. So I've been very much close to the sector, issues and causes that are typically underfunded. I've been one of those rare folks who love fundraising. So having these conversations in a professional setting is something that I've grown into. But to your point about the story and how your own personal backstory influences that is a really interesting one, because they dovetail the professional and the personal. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a way with a very similar money story to you: rob Peter to pay Paul. I was never deprived of anything. I had a wonderful experience, but I could always tell that there was a lot of stress under the, under the ripples, beneath the surface. And so that was always something that I noticed and I recognized and left an impression on me. And then I ended up marrying someone who did not have those kinds of problems. I happened to marry someone who came from a family with money, a significant amount of money, and that completely changed my whole world. I was forced to talk about it because in my family, we didn't talk about it. If you don't have it, then there's nothing to talk about, know? So, but in his family, they talked about it all the time, maybe instead of other things that maybe they should have been talking about. But it was a very big cultural shift. So those two experiences in my personal life, paired with the work that I was doing, I think formed in a very righteous and virtuous way to kind of come to philanthropic advising, to help people think about and manage how to effectively engage in the philanthropic and nonprofit sectors. And to do that and to give with intention and to give authentically, you need to not be afraid of having a conversation, being honest about money. It is what it is. It underpins all of our work.
Everything. So let's step back everything. So let's step back a little bit. We were talking, last week when we were preparing for this event, that money really is the last thing that we talk about, and it is taboo. Why is that? Like, why do we put so much emphasis on this conversation around money or not?
It's a great question. We used to also be really afraid of talking about politics, but that's been thrown out the window. I think most of the time with money, it's this fear. It's about a fear of being judged for having too little, for maybe having too much, for making the wrong decisions with it. The underpinning is generally about fear and worry and about how we are perceived, I think. And that, unfortunately, in our society, in our culture in the United States, we pin and tie how much money we have, how we got it, to how good a person we are. And it's unfair, and we all know that it's unfair, but somehow these messages have been inculcated in each of us in different ways. And I think that makes it for it to be a very personal and scary kind of topic.
Right. So if we take the meaning out of money, Stephanie, what does that do for us? You take the meaning, so money becomes a neutral, or it's a neutral topic.
Money
and
itself,
what kind of decisions can we make? So tell us about that. I think that's such an interesting notion.
Well, the idea is that money itself is a tool. It allows us to do things or to experience things. In and of itself, it's value neutral. It's how we put it to use is where the judgment and the productivity or not comes from. And I think ultimately, when we really want to think about what we can do with it, when you are in this place where you look at it as a tool and you kind of strip away all of the stuff that goes around it, it allows you to make informed decisions. A lot of those informed decisions are around things like equity. Are you being underpaid? We look at the pay gap between men and women, women still making 75 cents, if not less, I think 70 cents on the dollar for every man, but we don't talk about salaries. There's a big push in our sector to put salaries in job descriptions, so people actually know what they're signing up for. I mean, this is important things, but people are like, no, it's depending on experience, or they want to really keep that hidden away. And I'm happy to see that is changing. It also allows you, around this equity idea, it also allows you to get an idea of what it takes to advance in the world. If you want to take a step up and do something different with your life, well, how much does it cost? And this is a really interesting personal story that I had. This was before Zillow, but it was several years ago. I ordered takeout, and the Thai delivery guy came to deliver, and he said, "Man, I love your house. This is so beautiful. How much did you pay for that?" And all of us, I'm sure if you're American, you're like you kind of go through these contortions. How dare you ask me about? But he was a new immigrant, and I kind of did some awkward sort of dance around it. Well, we saved or whatever. No, how much? How much did you have to put down in cash? Because we're here, we're just. And I think that's a really kind of important story to sort of think about, because if someone is new, this is the part about equity. If you're new to a country, if you are an immigrant, if you are trying to advance in the world,
you need to know.
You need to know these things. Mm-hmm. And right now, it's only about who you know and your tight inner circle who will tell you the straight dope of how much this kind of house costs, or how much something else costs that you would need to save money for. But you're not going to get it from a stranger. So if you don't have a circle that knows how much certain things cost, you will never know.
Well, it's so interesting that, even in school, we don't learn about money, how to save it, how to think about, how to be strategic with it. And that's not something that's taught, well, it certainly wasn't taught when I was younger. And, it's such an important conversation. And when, I grew up in a single family with my mom who did not make a lot of money. And we certainly did not have conversations around money because it was rob Peter to pay Paul. And so whether you're, whether you just need to know the value of money and then what you can do with it. I think that's such an important piece of the money conversation.
And can I add too, going back to what I was saying about, women and fair pay, we as women need to get in more of a habit of talking to each other about money, as well, for all of those kinds of reasons. Just as we talk about men or children, it comes up to, savings. How do you know you have the right bank?
Right.
Like these are like really important things that are necessary for us as women to advance and for us as women to feel empowered. Again, it's this tool of money that we need, and we need to be able to share these resources around investing, around banking. And it's not just about deals or shopping, but the core of assets and understanding our assets.
Well, and also finding a good financial planner to help you plan ahead, know what type of, where to put your money, how to put it, how to invest it, how much you need. That was a big conversation for me. So let's take a step here and talk about everyone's money story. So I know you have a little exercise that you would like to share. So why don't we do that now?
I do. And Joni, you moderated it. You started it at the very beginning. And thank you for sharing your story with us. I would love to hear and see and read in the chat what other folks' money stories are. There's so many ideas. Joni said her family's money message was rob Peter to pay Paul. I had that one. The other thing that my dad always used to say was, there's no such thing as extra money. Because I always thought, well, if we had extra, can we get this? And he goes, there's no such thing as extra money. But there's so many. And if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat, money doesn't grow on trees. That is another one, Barb, and hi, Barb. But there are tons. And while you're doing it, live within your means. There's so many. Be grateful for what you have. Time is money. If you have a dime, save half, but how?
That's a good one. So this one says, early in life, my mother went through a rough divorce and consequently bankruptcy, and she never sat us down to have a conversation about how to manage money or how to manage credit cards. That's so true. Mine didn't either. I mean, a big day in our house, I'll just share this, was rob Peter to pay Paul. My grandmother would go get a loan for $300 at the bank and come home. She took the bus down to the University District here in Seattle, got the loan for $300. And it was like we had hit the jackpot on that day. And we had more, that day than we had ever had before. But I mean, it was just it was so wrong to teach that philosophy about money, right?
And then you wonder, what was their money story? Right. How much did they even know? But we pass these stories down, and we take a little bit of that and morph it into our own current day story, and then we kind of create something new for our children or the people that we're around. And I think it's important just to do little exercises like this, and this isn't anything big or fancy, but just to like actually stop and think that, I have a story about this. What is my issue? Because we all have it. And it's different issues, but they're all there, whether you grew up with a lot or a little, or you were solidly middle class. It's all there.
So Stephanie, once you identify that, or, most of us know what our money story was and is, when you identify, what do you do with that information?
Well, I think when you have that information, it's about being thoughtful. And when you have that information, you are in a better position to change what needs to be changed. You're in a better position to make better decisions about what you do with the money. You mentioned about, having a financial planner to look ahead and anticipate needs, anticipate dips, or when you have extra money, what my dad would be just cringing with me saying. But when you have a plan, it's an idea of having a plan. And then when you do that, you can use that knowledge to be stronger and to actually lead. There is a great book that I like to recommend to clients, and it was put out by this group called Resource Generation, which is a group for folks under 35 with inherited wealth. And we're trying to deal with that idea of having inherited wealth, but are wanting to be activist and progressive. And the title of the book is called How to Stop Hiding Your Privilege and Use It for Social Change. It's like the best title of a book that you could ever come up with, because it's perfect. And this goes to exactly to your question. Once you know what your story is and what it is, what can you do? You can actually lean into really making social change, because you are feeling more comfortable. You are feeling more confident in who you are and where you come from, wherever that is. You have that level of confidence to actually use what privilege that you have to make social change and help others make social change. And ultimately, for me, that is always my end goal. That is why I do what I do. That's why I'm here. That's why I have these conversations about money. It is less about this conversation in and of itself, but it's for what. And that for what is to actually be able to have the strength and the personal wherewithal to do something good with that. And that it's not only about giving cash, but it's using your stature, who you are, your privilege, your ties, your network, your testimony, all of these things that come around money to help you make our society better for more people. And as we all know, after 2020, that is what we need more than anything. And we all have a role to play with that for that to happen.
So you talked about philanthropy, and why don't you identify, you said that philanthropy equals the value that you can give. So how would you add on to that definition of philanthropy?
Well, philanthropy, and I name my firm Phila, Engaged Giving, and Phila is the Greek root of philanthropy, meaning a love of humanity. So ultimately, philanthropy is about a love of humanity. However you express that love, financially or otherwise, is all philanthropy. But philanthropy itself, in my mind, is about giving based on your values. It's a public expression of your own private values. And that comes out in many different forms. It comes out in the way that you volunteer, for whom you volunteer, where you actually give, tax exempt gifts to. It comes down to if you're an art collector. I work with folks who have art collections, and it's very similar. It's about, this represents who you are. And philanthropy, I think, done right and done in an authentic way, absolutely does that. And also, values are expressed not just in the philanthropic sector, but it's also expressed in the private sector and how we choose to spend our money. Again, you sort of started us off with this comment about looking to see, what does it say where my money is going?
Right.
Do I shop consciously, supporting neighborhood and small stores? Where are my investments? Am I an environmentalist in my philanthropic bucket, but my investments are in oil and gas?
There's no integrity there. You have to be really careful about that. I do want to just say that there's a quote from Anna LaPay. It's, every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world you want to have. And I just love that, because really that it's really true. And, whether you buy organic, whether you shop local, whether you are buying from Amazon every day versus, spending a little extra time and going to our local shops that need our support so badly. The other thing is around conscious shopping, whether you buy from a B corporation. You should look that up if you don't know what that means. But for instance, there's, I work out a lot and I buy athletic clothes. Well, Athleta is a B corporation, which is it's a very sustainable model of doing business. So I choose to go to Athleta over Lululemon because of their sustainability commitment. So that's one thing that I did want to mention. And then also whether, there's like a shop called Mate the Label, and they're an organic manufacturer, and all of their manufacturing is within 10 miles from their factory in LA. And so they're manufacturing here in the US, it's organic. They do a lot of things in their office. So that's a company that I would choose to support over another company, because they're not doing that same thing. So, that purchase power that we have is really immense, really, because every dollar that we spend, or every dollar that we invest, is a powerful moment that we choose in our life, and it says a lot about us.
Well, and look at what happened last year after May 25th, the murder of George Floyd. And everyone's attention was focused on race and the gap between, Black founded organizations, businesses, companies, and all of this business that has flowed not just to Black nonprofits, but also to Black-led businesses, bookstores. People kind of putting together crowdsourced lists of bookstores, where to get cosmetics. Sephora has just dedicated, 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned and suppliers of color. There is a lot that we can do. And I should say, one of the other things that, in addition to Phila, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that a partner and I also created an organization called Give Black, and that's blackblck.org. Which is a database of Black-led organizations, because everyone was wondering, well, where can I give to? We want to actually put our money in the right place. And when we say put our money, we're not talking about thousands upon thousands of dollars. In aggregate, yes, but one-off gifts that a number of people putting their money together has been huge. And so we created Give Black to be a central database for people to find Black organizations in the United States to, again, like Sephora, maybe giving a portion of your philanthropic budget to organizations who are working on the ground for issues like around racial equity.
That's fabulous.
And we've been doing that too. It's 2020 was just been a year where the lid has blown off of this idea of using our money in a more wise way. How many folks on this call have also started buying from local restaurants? The places that you thought maybe you've taken them for granted, and now COVID hit and everything was shut down, and you've completely changed how and where you buy to make sure that your local shop stays in business. Maybe buying, I know what I've been doing at the Pike Place Market downtown in our central mart, buying flowers upon flowers, dropping off flowers to people to keep our florists in business. I think so many of us have been making those kinds of conscious decisions. And of course, we may not be able to maintain that level of intensity, but what we're talking about and what this is an example of is how we can move forward, being a lot more thoughtful and a lot more intentional. And, maybe dare I say it and be a little, a little scratchy here, maybe we should be a little less lazy.
A little less lazy?
Lazy.
Well, I think we've grown
Right.
up in a very lazy society where we haven't asked the questions that we've needed to ask. And we have an upcoming Revel 11 talk on eco fashion, and the choices that we make in fashion. And I've been doing a lot of research on this as well. But we have been very lazy about, our manufacturing, our stocks, like you said, I'm very, very careful about that my stocks are in integrity with my values. And very few people say, think about that. I mean, even when this was a hot topic, Bill Gates was ostracized because his values were not matching his investments. And this is a conscious choice that we need to make every day. Now, it doesn't need to be difficult. You can, pick several different buckets that you want to, really emphasize, whether it's your giving or, me buying at Athleta versus, another company. But I mean, those small choices, like Stephanie said, really do make an impact. And I'd also like to say, and Stephanie, when we first started working together years ago, that you said you can start investing or giving away $25, or it can be, $100, it can be $1 million. For instance, in my giving portfolio, I started giving small, and then it's, as I've been making more money, then my giving increases. So everyone's a philanthropist. And can you talk about that a little bit? It all goes back to values.
It does. And sometimes I feel like I'm a broken record, and because at least for me, and the way that I sort of run my shop is I center it all on values and who you are. We spend a lot of time excavating what makes people tick around where they want to see themselves having, an impact. And that's kind of a knee-jerk phrase now, and it's been overused. But it's important to know, like, where do you want to be, and where do you feel that you can do the most good? And that is around values. And it doesn't always mean that it has to be the 5-6-figure gift. Some of the most important and meaningful gifts when I was running a nonprofit that I had there was this one woman, her name was Lois, and she was one of our most stalwart volunteers. And people think, well, they're not giving a whole lot. Am I really making a difference? Lois gave, I think, maybe $15, $20 a month every month, and she was retired. But I could count on Lois like clockwork. I can't tell you how many times that we were setting up, I was running a performing arts organization, and invariably something behind the stage would go sideways, or somebody crucial wouldn't show up. And at the very beginning, Lois was just a volunteer, off the street. She didn't have particular experience, but she really cared about it, and she was really invested in our success. And the fact that she was always there, I knew I could ask her for anything. That was invaluable. I needed Lois that night at that time more than I needed $10,000 at that moment. You know what I mean? True? It's so true. And I never want people to feel like their, little volunteer time goes unnoticed, or they don't care. So much you can learn and get for yourself, because giving is still a two-way street. Right. When we give, we also get a lot out of it. And I hope that one thing that everyone would take away from this call is how important volunteers are, because it's crucial to the survival of this sector, and it's extremely meaningful. And related to that, I just wanted to share another little anecdote, and this is about people searching and wanting to find a place where they belong and where they feel that they have impact, and thinking that it's only going to be a lot of money that can do it. I took a call a couple of years ago from a potential client who said, I wanted to talk with you about where I could have impact. I don't know what to do. And again, we're all based in Seattle, where two of the richest people in the world live, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. And this is how skewed our world can be. And I said, well, what are you thinking? What's your philanthropic budget once we got to it? And he's like, well, I'm giving away $1 million or $2 million a year, but I mean, does that really do anything?
Oh my God. Yes, it
I
does a
had
lot.
to, I had to like blink a couple times, not choke, come again. But this is a person who is, upwardly oriented, because when people, we all are either upwardly oriented or downwardly oriented. Looking at people who have more and striving for that, or is your focus at people who have less and being in touch with that? Here was someone who clearly was a very wealthy person, but he was looking up at Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. Well, I can't, solve malaria in a village in Rwanda.
Mhm.
So, I mean, like, what can I even do that has an impact? That's sometimes where we are. And I think a lot of it is our mindset. This goes back to that question about money messages. It's thinking, just really sitting with yourself and thinking like, how am I thinking about these things? Am I an upwardly oriented person, or am I a downwardly oriented person? And we may shift at different points,
Mhm.
and that's okay. And it's not necessarily that it's always a bad thing, but what we do need is to really be aware of it and check ourselves and have a real good understanding of where we are in this continuum of this world, and doing an asset inventory of all that we have to give, not just from our checkbooks,
Right.
but from our education, our networks, and how we can connect with others.
I think that's one of the most important things, that I've taken away from what you just said is, that connection that you had with Lois, for instance, was so true and real and meaningful, right? And then, for instance, I'm really involved with the Washington Farmland Trust because I think that farmland, near a major metropolitan city is important to save. So,
Mhm.
but I've built an incredible relationship with that nonprofit, both from a volunteer perspective and some money that I've been able to give over the years. And, but more than anything, I know that it's true to my heart, and I've built incredible relationships with those people. And that's just one nonprofit that I'm involved with. But I would say that, identifying something that is meaningful to you makes the communities or the relationship even more meaningful with the other people, like-minded people who are engaged.
Yeah.
So as far as I want to talk a little bit more about COVID, and then I want to talk about you as a philanthropic advisor and what that means.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that we've been talking about is how that we not only can give time, but, dollar or time and time and money. But there were some other things that you had on your list, Stephanie, on your website about things that you could do during this time of COVID. There's so much need,
Oh my gosh, yes.
locally, nationally, internationally, that we can all help with. So can you talk about some of those ideas that you had? And I thought that they were so powerful and important to discuss during this time.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I really particularly appreciate you giving me a platform to share some of these things, because it's not always what folks think about when there's a disaster.
And
But
this is a major disaster.
this is
So,
this is a disaster, capital D, full stop. Um, First of all, giving blood if you can. Hugely important. Actually, I gave blood for the first time last June 2020, for my birthday. I was turning 50 and I was supposed to have a big party. None of it happened. So I went to the Red Cross and donated blood for the first time. And I have to say, I felt so good doing that. For many years, I was always anemic and it was never a good thing for me to give blood. But now that I could, that is something that that is hugely needed, and it takes a good 40 minutes start to finish. So I wanted to give people that idea, number one. Second, supporting artists and makers in your community. Artists are a group that, again, I feel like sometimes, we take for granted. We don't realize how important art and it all is until it's gone. But if you think about how many of us most of us, I would say, felt watching Amanda Gorman, the young poet laureate. She is an artist through and through. Her creativity, her beauty with words, her body movements brought to us, and I think made us all feel so visceral. That is what good art can do.
Yes.
That is poetry. That is a song, like when you hear music that just really takes you away and captures you in a way that actually leaves you breathless. That is so important, especially during times like this.
Yes.
So I want to really emphasize supporting artists when you can. That means bookstores. If you're looking for art, go to a local gallery. Performing arts that are trying these poor theaters and everything. My heart is breaking, if you're able to, watch theater online when they try to put that together. So think about things like that and being a little bit more creative with how you can support artists. Also, calling out racism when you see it. There's no more.
I'm so glad you're just throwing this out there. It's so important.
I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know how I could not, because after all that we have experienced, if you're still feeling shy or not knowing how to say anything now, I don't know what else it will take, honestly, for folks to be firm and confident and saying and identifying what is wrong when we see things wrong. And this is in all aspects of our lives, personal, professional, in the neighborhood. These types of things are just not okay. It has never been okay, but now I feel too much is at stake. Too much is at stake. So too many people are on the absolute brink to dance around the edges and play nice when we see and we know something is fundamentally wrong. And this is, again, is just having the courage to stand up and step in the way of that.
And Venus in the chat said, bravo, Stephanie.
Oh, thanks, Venus.
And then we've already talked about supporting
small businesses, absolutely. And whichever ones that you want. Again, we can never get away from Amazon. It is what it is, and there's a place for it. But I think there's room for us to carve out some more space for our local bookstores, or trudging up to the hardware store. Can you imagine that? To grab a little something.
There's a really good online platform called the Intentionalist, and
I was going to mention that. That's right.
Okay, why don't you talk about the Intentionalist?
Well, you could probably talk about it as easily as I can, but it started by a woman here based in Seattle named Laura Cleese. And she essentially is putting together a website of small businesses, mostly owned by people of color, women, that are doing amazing work. Most of the businesses that I believe that are on there are creative, unusually sort of thoughtful type businesses where you can go and I believe it's now national. Or at least in several cities, New York, Seattle, and other places. But it's a wonderful resource. And she's gotten a lot of due praise for that.
You can go on there and say you're in Phoenix, for instance, and you can, if that is one of the cities, I'm not exactly sure, but you can say, hey, I want a woman-owned restaurant to go to. I want a Black-owned restaurant. I want a Black-owned business. And so it's a really good resource. And I would, as Stephanie said, highly recommend that. And also I would just say, continue to support your farmers markets for those that have local farmers markets, and the makers and growers that are there as well. Anything else to add to that list, Stephanie?
I don't think so. But I just want to tie something back that just came up about the Intentionalist. And I just love the name of the website, because that is actually really what we're talking about, because the opposite of having this intention is just being passive and going to the default. And right now the default is male-oriented, white male-oriented. And it all of this talk is not about taking things away, not showing support for businesses that are owned by men or white men. It's also about, can we grow the pie? Can we be more intentional in bringing other people in? Because there are a lot of people who are doing wonderful things. And, again, going back to the very beginning about money messages, unfortunately, in this very, very wealthy country of ours, we all operate on this scarcity model. And that we think that if we support this Vietnamese florist over here, farm worker over here, that means this person is not getting anything. Our economy is so big and so diverse and so robust. We absolutely have the capacity to bring more people into the fold. And frankly, as we all know, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Absolutely.
And then the other trope that I'll throw in is that we are only as strong as our weakest link. And we've seen 2020 has shown us how weak our country really is. We're not as strong as we think we are. It's because our fundamentals are in tatters.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're trying to do. This is why being intentional about how we use our money and where we put it is so, so important now more than ever.
And so do you want to tell us a little bit more about your role as a philanthropic advisor? We have touched on it throughout this conversation, but perhaps a little bit more detail on what that means and how you work with people.
Yeah, so I work with donors, exclusively with donors, so I don't have nonprofit clients, but with donors who are already giving a fairly significant amount annually to nonprofit entities, but they may be feeling like, how can I make this a little bit more reflective of actually who I am? How can I get more bang for my buck? Or oftentimes folks have experienced what's called a liquidity event. A company has gone public. They have inherited a certain amount of money unexpectedly. Anything like that, where all of a sudden they're feeling like, my gosh, I have more than I need right now. And I want to put this private wealth back into the public sphere. And that's my job. I move private wealth to the public. And it's a wonderful line of work. And I've enjoyed it tremendously because, again, I meet with people who want to be intentional and who are ready to do the big thoughts and be in a place to make some real change internally and then by extension externally.
Stephanie, I'm just so proud of you. I've watched you start this company from an idea, and in a very short time, the significant impact that you've made is really profound. So thank you for all of your work and for helping people really do something with their money and have it be meaningful and really to, ultimately make change in the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joni. I really appreciate it.
So does anyone have any questions? I know that I might have missed some in the chat here, but does anybody have a specific question for Stephanie? I know somebody asked about the Intentionalist being international, and I'm not sure about that. So you can go online and look at the Intentionalist and see if that's, I don't know that she's gone international yet. Somebody just said, thank you for your meaningful work, Stephanie. Well, with that, I think we'll close for the evening. Again, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for joining us for such an important conversation around money, where it starts with your story and then ultimately what you can do with it, and the social gift that we can give is a significant opportunity for all of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing the topic to the fore, Joni. I really appreciate it. It was great having it. I appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening and a good day, Guru.